these things come in waves, right? So when we have a protection-related issue, you will see an immediate wave of really quite bad-intentioned people jumping on. And when I'm talking about social media, I'm really talking about the ones I'm most familiar with, which is above all Twitter, but also Facebook, Instagram, and a few others. I'm not really talking about messaging apps, which is to me quite a different thing. So on Twitter and other Facebook, we'll see a first wave of tweets and disinformation coming from people who really do not have these vulnerable people and their best interests in mind at all. And they're usually actually first to react. So, I mean, in that, I would throw in some of the far right groups, some of the anonymous trolls and voice. They are much quicker than we are at Human Rights Watch, or more calm or sensible or caring, compassionate voices are. They just are. They're just much faster at that. So that's kind of the first wave. Then you get a second wave of a reaction, which is usually integrated into more official media getting involved. And there's this circular pattern between the traditional media and social media in terms of each feeds the other. So traditional media will report on something, social media will respond to that, linking to it, and then the traditional media will then pick up on the social media and say people are saying, and this report comes from here and that report comes from there. And then you have like a filter problem of if you're just an average user of social media, you have a filter problem of who should I listen to, who's sending this information, and the best images, videos, and things that are shocking looking do very well. Videos and images that we would never use at Human Rights Watch because they're exploitative of victims or survivors, things that we would never use for other reasons. Other people have no problem using those. So they get an unfair kind of head start and an unfair amount of attention. The major media come in and deal with it. And then you start to get the voices voices from civil society and from the agencies who kind of chime in. We are not as fast. We just simply aren't, because we're cautious and we're careful, and we try not to say things before we know what's happening on the ground. Many of the UN agencies are the same. Humanitarian agencies are often, of the exact same mind. We're always fighting back against that, and that's kind of a problem. That's kind of the problem that we all have. That's we'll never be, and we have to kind of accept that we'll never be as fast as the, for lack of a better term, bad guys. And we have to kind of, we have to play catch up, and we're always switching a narrative around, like almost always. I can't think of a crisis situation where we're not switching around a narrative that we've fallen behind on. And it's just kind of the nature of what we are. And where governments fall in those waves depends on, how or what types of governments they are. With our overall advocacy, we do an advocacy mapping exercise usually, if not like physically on paper or on a screen, we're doing it in our heads, where we're trying to figure out who our allies and enemies will be at a particular issue. And then we think of our primary targets and our secondary or tertiary targets. Our primary targets are people who can make the decisions that we want to be made, that we need to be made, and those will, usually be government officials and some international bodies as well. So those are the primary ones. Now, how do we reach those? And then we think, okay, what's the best method for reaching those primary targets? And then we have to think about the private-public mix. Like, if we can just call up, the Minister of the Interior on the phone and have a reasonable, rational conversation with a reasonable, rational person on the other end of the line, and explain to them whatever, a legal situation or a humanitarian situation, and get a decent response without any publicity, hey, that's fine, that's great. Usually we don't have that situation. So we're looking at some kind of mix of public and private. And the private is the meetings and the calls, and the public is, includes social media. And we're always trying to kind of feed that cycle into a story. So we're feeding the traditional media, we're feeding journalists with information from our reports, from our on the ground research, and we're feeding social media with those media stories that come out and our own information as well. So we're trying to kind of keep these stories going, because as we all know, the media stop reporting on a crisis as soon as the next crisis comes along, and then we're sort of back to square one. First of all, I would say whenever people bring up this bubble issue, I always say, actually, there's value in talking to each other and to reinforcing allies. And sometimes, we think we have allies in places and we don't, or sometimes we don't know we have allies in places that we do. But there's just like a value in saying this is important, this is something that concerns all of us, and to kind of get that attention and buy-in and acceptance within our own group. There's something to be said just for propping up your allies. That's important. If we speak and we don't see any of our allies supporting us, that's a really, it's a terrible thing. So, don't underestimate that. And also, I would say, don't overestimate how much you can really impact people who start off being diametrically opposed. You're never going to get, if there's just some people on your advocacy map, you create your advocacy map, and then, there's some people in the corners of your advocacy map that are just never, ever, ever going to be on sides or even give you any credit or any sympathy or anything. So that's not where I would ever spend time. Trying to get some people in the middle is useful, whether they're primary targets or secondary targets. Trying to get some of those, whether they're influencers like media editorial writers or whether they're policy analysts who are sort of in the middle, respected. Sometimes they kind of go on this side. Sometimes they're a little bit negative towards our issues. But that's where I would spend the time. Quite frankly, an armed group or a government pushing out propaganda to kind of support its position in the situation of a conflict, it's much the same problem, especially when they control. If either of them control an area, they're the effective authority in that region that they control or that area that they control. It's extremely difficult to get information out and in, and what you can do about that is kind of limited. And supporting, there are journalism and media development organizations that try to work in those situations and try to provide facts, and it's great to support them. In terms of responding to them, like on social media or publicly, I mean, in general, I just wouldn't. I mean, I don't, there's this idea that if you repeat somebody else's lie, it kind of just continues, or if you repeat their propaganda, it kind of like promotes their propaganda. So even just responding to it kind of gives it more attention. So sometimes I would just maybe just drop that. Like any media outlet can become a kind of cog in the machinery of mass atrocities, right? Like, so it can be a radio station, it can be a television station, it could be a Facebook channel, it could be a Twitter account. And, those things have to be shut down very quickly. Twitter's getting a little bit better at that sort of thing and cracking down on it when accounts are reported. Facebook is getting better, I would say, at big languages like English and French, maybe. But they're terrible at it in other languages. They don't have the capacity, and they've kind of for years refused to create the capacity to monitor those languages, even in situations when mass atrocity crimes are unfolding. So there's more awareness of it now because of mistakes that have happened in the past, but they're still not there yet, particularly in other languages. So if you see something like that happening, and getting in touch with those companies, I think, is extremely important, especially if you come from a government or a respected international agency. And if you don't know who to get in touch with, tell me, and I'll tell, and I can get in touch with people at Facebook or Twitter or whatnot. I mean, we report things like that with some frequency.
I think that talking about the benefits, I think that we all know them, right? It's quite simple what the benefits are. You can reach a lot of different people. You can reach people that are connected with the communities, but not necessarily within that physical context, like, for example, diaspora. You can involve very different actors at different levels, and you have this ability to immediately adjust and adapt to what's happening on the ground in order for your advocacy strategy to actually be flexible and actually being able to follow the events rather than being something like a one-off that then remains there. When we are looking at all of these risks and challenges, the first thing that I think we need to accept is that it is unpredictable, and it will continue to be unpredictable because it is about interactions in between people. It is about emotions. It is about different kind of contribution that people give on a specific topic. And so when we are looking at advocacy in that regard, and when we're looking at communicating and interacting with communities, the risks are huge, because the risks are not just for us that we get misunderstood and then we have problems in getting our message across, but the risks are also for the community that we engage in that. Because, let's just think about, for example, at reprisals, where, we engage certain members of the community, even the online community, to work with them, to use them as our voices within, for certain topics. And then these people get targeted because they are associated with us, because they are associated with international organizations or specific issues. And so we have a double face when we're looking at the risks. And in my experience, the idea of marrying the unpredictability of it is related to the fact that if we do that, we stop treating advocacy or social media especially as publishing tools. And we really start looking at what we can do when we engage with people on a continuous way. And this also speaks to how we break the cycle. In my experience, we only break the cycle when we accept to engage directly with communities on issues that are uncomfortable. Because that's the thing, right? If you want to talk about gender-based violence in a country where you know that this is the problem, and you know that there are cultural issues related to why the problem is not addressed in a certain way, you are going to have very uncomfortable conversations with the communities. But the only way in which you involve them is by engaging in those conversations. And on social media, for me, that remains one of the biggest obstacles that we see right now, which is that we're not used to do that. Organizations are not used to go into a Facebook thread of comments under a specific campaign and start responding and engaging, say, actually, this is not what we mean, this is what we mean, and this is why we're advocating for this. We really have almost zero ability to do that. And that's where, for me, there is a shift in the mentality that we have. There is a shift in the way we think about how do we advocate for certain rights. Because if, the Kenyan citizen writes, I don't want more refugees because I already don't have a job. And why would I divide my resources with someone that is not even from this country? We cannot not engage in that conversation because he has a point. And ignoring it or putting it into the bucket of, you're just one of the bad people, or you're just one of the people that disagree, but I can still continue talking with the people that I agree with. At the end of the day, it's not really advocacy, right? You're not really actually changing the conversation. And on social media, this becomes fundamental. People don't go on social media to just watch a video. People go on social media to watch a video and comment on it and share it with someone and send it to someone else and see what they think about it, and then go on Twitter and repost it. So the lack of engagement at the beginning will, in my experience, helps amplify the issue. It doesn't help to get it to disappear. When we don't talk about something, people will still continue to talk about it if that's an important issue for them. And they will still ask for answers, and they will still prompt. And that's where you create a very fertile environment for misinformation. That's where you create the environment where I'm not telling what happened because either I don't know or I'm not sure about it. So you can just imagine whatever you want. And so there we go into the ability that we have to, as I said before, embrace the unpredictability, right? It is unpredictable. People will take something that you have very carefully drafted and put together and change it and twist it. The question is not that people have done it. The question is, why did they do it? What is it in the interaction with you that has not worked? Where is that trust relationship, that ability that you have for people to actually trust your message and believe in it and have an engagement with you? That helps the fact that when you broadcast something or when you publish something, there may be actually members of the community that do speak on your behalf, that do actually intervene and actually speak on your behalf to, to address certain issues. So I think that, it's complicated. It's not easy, right? It's like it's not something that, we snap our fingers and it's going to happen. But I think that we need to start thinking about how it is a different system when we are looking at advocating for issues within communities. And in that regard, it's really all about how honest we are in our engagement with them. And also the risks attached to it are very much related to that.